Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ashok IT, and this is Ashok. Today, we are here to discuss about what is the Spring Boot and what are the benefits of using Spring Boot and how to create Spring Boot project and what is the project folder structure and how Spring Boot is working internally. And mainly, we are going to talk about Spring versus Spring Boot. So already Spring framework is available in the market to develop Java based applications. Then why Spring Boot came into picture? Why Spring Boot is having this much demand and what exactly making the Spring Boot this much popular in the market? Good, fine. Let's get started. So first one, what is the Spring Boot? So here, if you want to understand this Spring Boot, we can say, first we need to know about Spring Framework. So from 2004 onwards, Spring Framework available in the market. Spring Framework available in the market from 2004 onwards. By using Spring Framework, we can develop below types of applications, right? So we can develop CLI based applications and we can develop web-based applications and we can also develop distributed applications, nothing but REST APIs. Distributed applications also we can develop by using this Spring framework. Console based applications, command line, the application that you can execute through command prompt, command line, that application you can develop by using Spring. Web applications you can develop by using Spring. Even REST APIs also we can develop by using Spring framework. And Spring framework is called as application development framework. Application development framework. So we can develop all the layers of the application by using Spring framework. You can develop controllers, you can develop services, you can develop repositories, DAO classes, all the layers of the application we can develop by using this Spring framework. When this Spring framework is available in the market, Struts framework, when the Spring became very popular in the market, Struts framework got outdated. Hibernate framework also got outdated. So because the Spring is having so many advantages, it is providing so much code reusability. Okay, whatever the logics that we need to write, whatever the logics that we need to implement in the project, instead of we are writing everything on our own, the Spring framework will provide the common logics for the application development. Spring framework will provide common logics for application development. Spring framework will provide common logics for application development. So we can focus only on the business logic development. Framework will provide you common logics. You focus only on the business logic development. So what is the advantage? We can do more work in the less time when you use the framework. We can do more work in less time by using frameworks. So Spring framework available in the market from 2004 onwards. So this is developed by Spring framework developed by Rod Johnson. Spring framework developed by Rod Johnson. By using this framework, we can develop console-based applications, we can develop web-based applications, and we can develop distributed applications also. This framework is called as application development framework. So this framework will provide common logics for the application development. We can focus only on the business logic development when we use this Spring framework. Let me show you one simple example how it is different. So earlier, if you want to communicate with the database, we will use a normal JDBC. So if you go for normal JDBC, you should write these many lines of code to communicate with the database. So I want to insert one record into table. I need to get the connection. I need to prepare the statement. Okay, I need to call the methods and I need to handle the exception. So a lot of things we need to do in the normal JDBC. So you are writing connection, statement, closing connection, everything. This opening the connection, preparing the statement, closing the connection, it is a common for every method. So that's why they, in the Spring framework, they avoided that common logic. We are focusing only on the business logic. What is your query? You just give the query, Spring framework will take care of that. So this is the main benefit of using frameworks to develop the project. So you have JDBC to communicate with the database. But what is the problem with the JDBC? So many lines of code we need to write manually when we go for JDBC. So instead of we are doing that by using JDBC, if you use Spring JDBC with one line of code, you can insert the record into the same table. And one more thing. So we are having one form. So we are having one web application. In that one form, registration form available. I want to capture that form data and I want to store that data into database table. So to capture the form data, that means it is a web application. We will use a servlet. Okay, so this is the logic I should write in the servlet program. So I need to capture the form data by using request.get parameter. So I'm capturing the name, email, phone number, gender, then convert that data into one Java object, then save that object data into database table by using JDBC. So again, we are writing 30-40 lines of code just to capture the form data and store into database table. Are you guys able to follow me? So capturing the form data is only my project requirement. Capturing the form data is common for every project, guys. Capturing the form data is only my project requirement. That is common for everybody. I want you people to speak out.
Common requirement.
That is a common requirement for everybody. But everybody should write this logic in the servlet. So here, getting the connection, preparing the statement, is it only for my project or that is also common for everybody? Is it only my project requirement? That is also common for everybody. That is also common for everybody. That is also common for everybody. So if you develop your project by using JDBC servlet, so lot of duplicate code we need to write, lot of boilerplate code we need to write, guys. Lot of duplicate code we need to write, lot of boilerplate code we need to write when we use this normal JDBC or when we use servlet to develop the web application. So common logics we need to write. Project contains a common logics plus business logics. So if you don't use the framework, then you need to write the logic on your own. So Spring framework came into market from 2004 onwards. This framework developed by a person called Rod Johnson. How we have James Gosling for the Java. Similarly, we have Rod Johnson for the Spring framework. What we can do by using this Spring? What type of applications we can develop by using Spring? We can develop console-based applications. We can develop web-based applications. We can develop distributed applications also. So Spring framework, by using this Spring, we can develop all the layers of the framework. That is the reason Spring framework is called application development framework. This framework will provide common logics for the application development. So when they are providing common logics, you focus only on the business logic development. And what is the benefit? We can do more work in the less time by using framework, because so instead of writing 20 lines, you are writing only 2 lines of code. Instead of writing 10 lines, you are writing only 1 line of code. Instead of writing 20 lines of code, same form which I am trying to store by using servlet with 20 lines of code. If I use a framework with 1 line, the same task will be completed. I have the form. If I want to capture the form data by using servlet, so we need to write so many lines of code. So if I use framework, same form data I can store in the table just by writing 1 line of code. Now tell me, can you get a job without having the knowledge on the frameworks? Will anybody develop a project in the company without using the frameworks? Guys, will anybody develop a project without using these frameworks? Can you imagine any project development without using frameworks?
No, sir.
No. So it's mandatory that every Java developer should learn the framework in order to develop the projects. So every company is using this frameworks concept only to develop the projects. Okay, so that's where Spring framework came into picture. Spring framework became very popular in the market from 2004 to 2013, 2014. The Spring framework was having lot of demand in the market. Then in 2015, Spring Boot came into picture. So Spring Boot came into market in the year of 2015. Sir, already Spring framework is available in the market that became super success in the market. So many companies developed projects by using Spring framework. It is successful. When the Spring is already successful, then why they released Spring Boot? That is the question. When the Spring is already successful, why they released Spring Boot? Now you can understand. So in our movies, Tollywood or Bollywood, if one movie became super hit, then what they will do, guys? If one movie became super hit, then what they will do?
Remake.
Remake is there, and one more thing, sequel, part two.
Dubbed. Bahubali EP.
Bahubali part 1 successful, part 2 came, right? Robo 1 successful, Robo 2 came, right?
Kantara Picture 1.
Sequel, Kantala prequel came for Kantara, right? So success. When the movie became successful, they are coming up with the sequel for that movie to do the more business, to make the more money. Same thing applied here also. Spring framework became successful in the market. The company who developed this Spring framework, they realized that Spring framework became super success in the market. It became big hit in the market. Let's go for next version of the Spring. That's where Spring Boot came into market in the year of 2015. So what is this Spring Boot here? Spring Boot is an extension for the Spring framework. Spring Boot is not replacement for the Spring, guys. Spring, which company developed Spring framework, same company developed Spring Boot also. And when they are releasing this Spring Boot into market, they told that Spring Boot is an extension for existing Spring framework. Is an extension for existing Spring framework. Earlier, people developed projects by using Spring framework directly. Spring framework provided some classes. By using those classes, we developed our projects. Earlier, how projects executed? Earlier, people developed Java applications. So that Java application developed based on Spring framework. That Java application developed based on Spring framework. Okay. So our Java application will talk to Spring framework. That is how they develop. But now what people are doing here? People are developing Java application by communicating with the Spring Boot, not directly with the Spring. So now people are developing the projects by communicating with the Spring Boot, guys. By communicating with the Spring Boot. Then what this Spring Boot is doing? This is Spring Boot internally using the Spring framework only. So we are developing the projects by using Spring Boot. That Spring Boot is internally communicate with the Spring only. That's why I'm saying that Spring Boot came into market in the year of 2015. This Spring Boot is an extension for existing Spring framework. And Spring Boot is a replacement for the Spring, or Spring Boot is the extension for the Spring, guys? Come on.
Extension.
Spring Boot is a replacement for the Spring.
Extension.
Spring Boot is extension for the Spring. Spring Boot is an extension for the Spring framework. Spring came into market in the year of 2004. That became super success in the market. By using that, we can develop console-based applications. By using Spring, we can develop web applications. By using Spring, we can develop distributed applications also. They will provide you common logics for the application development. You focus only on the business logic development. I have shown you example. If you want to capture form data by using servlet, these many lines of code you need to write. Capture form data, request.get parameter, convert that data into object format, save that record into database table, prepare the response, send the response to the browser. So this much code we need to write in the servlet program just to capture the form data stored into database. But when it comes to the Spring, just with one line of code, everything will be completed. Whatever that you are doing by writing 20 lines of code, same task we can complete by writing just one line of code. So that is the power of the Spring framework. So when the Spring framework is successful in the market, then why this Spring Boot came into picture? What is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? That is our class agenda today. What is our class agenda? What is the Spring Boot? how it is different from the Spring framework, and what are the main advantages of the Spring Boot. So Spring Boot came into market in the year of 2015. This Spring Boot is an extension for existing Spring framework, not replacement, guys. So earlier, people developed Java projects by using Spring framework directly. In this Spring framework, what available? Some predefined classes available. By using them, we can access the common logic. We can focus only on the business logic. Now, when we go for the Spring Boot, also same thing. Instead of our project directly communicating with the Spring framework, our project is communicating with the Spring Boot. Spring Boot is internally communicating with the Spring framework. Sir, what is the benefit we are getting with this Spring Boot? What is the benefit we are getting with this Spring Boot? And what we can do by using Spring Boot? Using Spring Boot also, we can develop same type of applications. Whatever the applications you can develop by using Spring, same type of applications we can develop by using Spring Boot also, REST APIs and microservices. Right. So we can develop standalone applications by using Spring Boot, which can run on the console. And we can develop web applications by using Spring Boot. We can develop microservices also by using Spring Boot. Okay. Now, sir, by using Spring also we are doing same thing. By using Spring Boot also we are doing same thing. Then what is the difference? Are you guys getting my question? Are you guys with me? Please respond in the chat box. Are you guys with me? Could you please unmute your mic? If you guys respond,
Yes,
then
sir.
I will get
Yes,
more
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Class is going speed, or you are able to follow me?
Yes, we are able to follow you.
Right. Now my question is, by using Spring, we can develop standalone applications. By using Spring, we can develop web applications. By using Spring, we can develop distributed applications like microservices. By using Spring Boot also, we can do the same thing. When the Spring is already available, then why this Spring Boot came into picture? Now understand, Spring versus Spring Boot. Now understand, Spring versus Spring Boot. If you see, here I developed one project in the regular Spring Boot class. Yesterday, I developed one normal project. So in this normal project, I am starting the IOC container. Application context is equal to new class path XML application context. So as a programmer, I am writing the logic to start the IOC container. For that IOC container, I am giving XML file as a input. So in that XML file, I'm configuring my Java classes as a Spring Beans. So like this, if you develop a project by using Spring Framework, some configurations we need to do manually. So if we develop a project by using Spring, then we need to manage the configurations on our own. So this is the main difference between the Spring and Spring Boot, guys. If we develop project by using Spring, then we need to manage configurations on our own. So what kind of configurations, guys? Okay, so configure Spring Bean in XML. Next one, start IOC container. And the next one, set up Tomcat server. So all these kind of stuff we need to do manually in the Spring project. So if we develop a project using Spring framework, then we need to manage configurations on our own. But these configurations are only for my project. These configurations are common for every project, guys. Starting the IOC container, setting up the beans XML, starting the Tomcat server to run the web application. These configurations are only for my project. These configurations are common for every project. These are only for my project, or these are common for every project, guys?
Common.
These are common for every project. Okay, so configuring the Spring Bean in the XML file, starting the IOC container, setting up the Tomcat server, these are common for every project. Then in the 2014-2015, this Spring framework team realized that, array, our framework became super hit in the market. So many people are developing the projects by using Spring, but there is one problem in our framework. What is that problem? I have seen 10 different people projects developed by using Spring. In 10 projects, they are doing the same thing. They are configuring Spring Beans in the XML file. They are starting the IOC container manually. Everybody setting up the Tomcat server to run the application. These are common for every project. Then why everybody should do this configuration in the project? Why can't we automate this configuration? That's where the Spring Boot came into picture. Spring is already successful. There is no doubt about that. From 2004 onwards, the Spring framework became super hit in the market. People started developing the projects by using Spring. But one common problem that they realized, in every project we are doing all these works. These are common for every project. When these are common for every project, why framework cannot automate? That's where Spring Boot came into picture with one simple concept that is called auto configuration. That is with one simple concept, with one simple thought in their mind, they came into market with a concept called Spring Boot. That concept is called auto configuration. That became biggest revolution in the Java community. That auto configuration, which is introduced by the Spring Boot, that became biggest revolution in the industry. Now every company who are using Java, they are using Spring Boot to develop the project, because auto configuration is that much powerful feature that introduced by the Spring Boot. So if anybody asks you, what is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? One single line you can say, auto configuration. In the Spring framework, some configurations we need to do manually as a programmer. Those configurations are common for every project. Those configurations are automated by the Spring Boot. Spring Boot, one of the biggest advantage, auto configuration. Because of that auto configuration, Spring Boot became super success in the market. Now every company who are using Java to develop the projects, 100% they are using Spring Boot to develop that project, because Spring Boot is providing auto configuration. So auto configuration means you no need to start the IOC container programmatically. Boot will start that. You no need to set up the server manually. Spring Boot will set up that. You no need to configure the classes in the XML. Spring Boot will take care of that. Whatever the work that we are doing manually, that work automated in the Spring Boot. Okay, if we develop the project using Spring Boot, then we will get the auto configuration. Whatever the configurations we need to do manually in the Spring project, those configurations are automated by Spring Boot. So by using Spring Boot, we can achieve rapid application development. You don't need to configure the beans in the XML. You don't need to start the IOC container. You don't need to set up the Tomcat server. Within 1 minute of time, you can set up your web application ready and you can execute that. Because the things which are required, whatever the configurations that are required for the project, those configurations are taken care by Spring Boot. Let me show you how quickly I can set up one web application by using Spring Boot. File, I'm using Spring Toolsuite IDE just for sample. I want to show you the power of Spring Boot just within 1 minute. I want to show you what is the meaning of rapid application development. So rapid application development, nothing but very quickly we can develop and we can execute our application. See that? Are you guys ready to see the power of the Spring Boot now? Guys, are you ready to see the power of the Spring Boot now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So I'm going to my IDE. I'm not doing anything. Just I will create one project. File, new, Spring Starter project I'm creating. Spring Starter project, nothing but Spring Boot application. So here, in order to create the Spring Boot application, it's a mandatory. You need to use either Maven or Gradle. So I'm using Maven as a build tool. Group ID in.Ashok IT. Group ID means company domain name. Artifact ID, project name, package name. What is the package name? In.Ashok IT. So I'm using Maven as a build tool in order to develop our first Spring Boot project. Click on next tab. Here I am using one dependency, Maven dependency, which is called Web Starter. and I'm using another dependency which is called the dev tools. I will tell you what is the purpose of these dependencies also. One is Spring Web, that means Spring Web MVC. When I talk about Spring Web, it is Spring Web MVC. Can you see what they are saying about the Spring Web? Can anyone read out loudly? Any cute little boy?
Build web including RESTful application using Spring MVC uses Apache Tomcat as the default embedded container.
So that means when you create a Spring Boot application, if you use Spring Web, that means we are using Spring Web MVC module. So Spring Boot internally uses Spring modules only. Spring Boot is not separate framework. Spring Boot is just an extension for the Spring framework. So if you use the Spring Web dependency, by using that you can create web applications, you can create REST APIs by using Spring MVC internally. And it is going to use Apache Tomcat as the embedded container. You no need to set up the server also. Spring Boot will provide you Tomcat server by default, inbuilt server for you. Now I am adding one more dependency, dev tools. So what is the purpose of dev tools? Can you read that? Come on.
Provides fast application
Provides
restarts
fast
and
application restarts. So whenever there is a code change, immediately it will restart your server also. Click on next, click on finish. I created one project by adding two dependencies, Maven dependencies.
Sir,
One is called web dependency, another one is called DevTools dependency.
Sir, what is the difference between Maven and Gradle?
We will talk about that. That is a separate topic. Okay. In the build tools concept, I will tell you. For at this moment, to give you clarity, I don't want to disappoint you. Maven is a build tool that is used for only Java projects. Gradle is another build tool that supports Java and other programming languages also like Kotlin, Groovy, etc. Java specific to, Maven specific to only Java. Gradle along with Java, it supports for few other programming languages also for the build process. Okay, happy?
Now, one more thing, do we need to, when we are developing the Spring application, Spring Boot application, we need to connect with the internet?
Yes, sir, that is mandatory. I will tell you why to connect with the internet also. Now, so boot project got created. Now, go to this project. One Java class is created by default. In that Java class, main method is available. Remember that when you create any Spring Boot application, by default, one Java class will be created. In that main method will be available. From here, boot application will start. Now, let me write one simple method, public string welcome. So I will say return welcome to Spring Boot. Now I will use this as @get mapping. I will use @get mapping. And here I will mention @rest controller. That's it. With this, my web application is ready with the Spring Boot. Now let's go and run this main method. Right click, run as boot application. I created a project and I added one method. That's it. Now I am running my project. See the power of auto configuration now. See the power of auto configuration now. Go to the console. Check this one. Check this one. What it is doing, guys? What it is doing now?
internally Tomcat started.
Tomcat server started with the port number 8080. So what is where the Tomcat server running? In my system only Tomcat is running. Tomcat running on which port number? 8080 slash. Now, am I able to access my web application?
Yes, sir.
So how much time it is taking to develop a web application by using Spring Boot? Less than minute. Less than a minute. So that is the meaning of rapid application development. Spring Boot supports rapid application development. Can you achieve this by using servlet JDBC?
No, sir.
Can we do a web application this much quickly by using servlet? No. Can we develop a web application this much quickly by using normal Spring framework? No. If you go for
No, sir.
normal Spring, you need
No, sir.
to set up the Tomcat server.
Sir.
You need to run your application in the Tomcat server. But in the Spring Boot, that a Tomcat server is embedded server, inbuilt, auto configuration. auto configuration. Now tell me, if anybody asks you, what is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? What is the one-line answer?
Auto
Auto
configuration.
configuration.
Boot can
Auto configuration. So if we develop a project using Spring, then we need to manage configurations on our own. So configure Spring Beans in the XML file, okay, or in the Java classes. Start the IOC container programmatically, set up the Tomcat server manually, and deploy the application in the Tomcat server. Deploy, run application, run web app in server, run web app in server. So all these things programmer has to do when we go for the Spring framework. If we develop the project using Spring Boot, then we will get auto configuration. If we develop the project using Spring Boot, then we will get auto configuration. Using Spring Boot, we can achieve rapid application development. What is the meaning of rapid application development? Within a minute, we can set up, we can develop and execute, we can develop and run web applications using Spring Boot. That practically I have shown you. So how much time it is taking for me to create a web application and to execute a web application, to access web application? Now this is running in my local system, localhost :8080. So with this URL, I'm able to access my application. I want to change the message. Instead of welcome to Spring Boot, I'm giving the message as welcome to Ashok IT. I'm giving the message as welcome to Ashok IT. Now can you see server is restarted automatically? Now go and access this. Are you able to access latest messages also? Do I need to restart the server or Spring Boot will take care of that?
Spring Boot take it.
Do I need to restart the server or Spring Boot will take care of that?
Spring Boot will take it.
Spring Boot will take care of that. Can I show you one more magic also? Now, if I hit this URL, am I able to access this directly? With this URL, am I able to access my method directly or not? My method I am accessing directly. Now, I don't want people to access my method like this directly. I want to keep some security for my project. I want to keep some security for my project. See here. How to achieve the security easily. Go to this project pom.xml. I will add one dependency here. That is Spring Boot Starter Security. I will add, I'm not doing any coding. I'm adding only one dependency that is called Spring Boot Starter Security. Now, whenever there is a change, the server is getting restarted automatically. Whenever there is a code change, then the server is getting restarted automatically. When the dependencies are changed, you better to stop and start the server. You better stop and start the server. I stopped my project. I changed a dependency. I added security starter in the pom.xml. Go to application.java, run as boot application. Go to application.java and run as Spring Boot application. So before adding this security starter, I was able to access my project. Now, after adding this security starter, go to here and access it. What happened now? Am I able to access my method directly or I'm not able to access my method directly? Guys, if I want to access localhost :80
Not able to
slash, am I getting the response directly or it is asking me to log in? Am I getting the response directly or it is asking me to log in now?
asking to log in.
Enter some credentials. Enter some credentials. What it is saying?
Invalid credentials.
So where is this logic? Did I write this logic?
No. No.
Did I develop this form?
No.
Who is giving this?
Spring.
That is called auto configuration. So whenever you add a security starter in the pom.xml, by default, Spring Boot will provide you a login page for your application. So if anybody want to access, authentication is required. Username should be user. Password, they will give on the console. So go to the console of your application, generated security password. Copy this password and give this here. Username is user, password is available on the console. Click on sign in. If credentials are valid, then I am getting the message. Then my request is processed. So this is called authentication. So who provided this authentication for the project now? Who provided this authentication for the project now? Spring Boot provided authentication based on one dependency we are adding in the pom.xml. What is that dependency, guys? What is the dependency?
Spring Boot
Security
starter.
Boot starter security.
Security starter I have added. So we got the Tomcat server. We added starter web dependency. That's why we got the Tomcat server. Now suppose if I remove this security starter web starter dependencies now, then remove this REST controller, remove these things also. Nothing is available. So this is like a normal. Whatever the new project that we created, that normal project is available here. Now go to this console. Now run the application. I removed the method and I removed my dependencies also. Web dependency removed, security dependency is also removed from the pom.xml. Now go and execute our application. When you remove this starter, right? Normal starter I will add, not web starter. Normal Spring Boot starter dependency I am adding to run the project. Web starter is not available now. Normal Spring Boot starter I am using. Now run the application, run as boot application, go to the console and see Tomcat server is coming. Tomcat server is not coming now. Can you see here? Tomcat server is coming. Tomcat server is not coming now.
Not coming.
Tomcat server is not coming.
Not
Why the
coming.
Tomcat server is not coming? Web starter is not available. So if I add normal starter, Tomcat server is not coming. Now I will show you one more thing. Let me create one Java class. Let me create one Java class. So create the class as a car. Okay. Car constructor I am writing. Simple constructor. System.out.println. Car constructor. I will represent this class as a string bean by using one annotation called component annotation. By using one annotation called component annotation, I'm creating a car class. Now go and run the application. Now go and run the application. Can you see car object is created?
Yes, sir.
Who is creating this car object? Am I writing the logic to start the IOC here? Am I writing the logic to start the IOC here?
No.
Whenever you execute this main method, internally Spring Boot will start the IOC container and it is going to identify the bean classes, Spring Bean classes, create the object. So my car class is represented as a Spring Bean with the annotation. From now onwards, XML is not required. From now onwards, XML is not required. Everything we are managing through annotations only. No XML configurations. And whenever you run the boot application, by default, IOC container will start as part of run method. So inside this run method, we'll talk about this run method clearly. Go inside the run method. Inside the run method, if you see, lot of logic will be available. One line, if you observe, line number 315. Inside the predefined method, framework method. What is the line number 315?
It was created in the application context.
That means it is creating the IOC container and it is returning the application context. What is the return type of this run method? This run method return type is configurable application context, which is IOC container. Context dot get beans, get count. Okay, bean definition count. How many beans loaded by this IOC container? You can check that. System.out.println count I want to see. How many bean classes loaded by the IOC? Get bean definition count. So how many beans are loaded, guys? How many classes already loaded by IOC? 72 classes already loaded. But how many classes we created?
One.
Only one class we
class.
created. Then what about the remaining 71?
That is internally created by Spring Boot.
Those are the internal classes of the Spring Boot. Those classes contains the common logics. instead of you are starting the Tomcat server, instead of you are starting the IOC container, so the framework, instead of you are providing the login page for authentication, all the logics are available in the predefined classes. That is the power of framework. Framework will give you common logics. You use that common logics and you develop your own business logic. Then you can do more work in the less time. 72 classes already loaded. In that 72, only one class I created. That is a car class. So IOC container started, object is also created. But if I go for Spring Framework, the first project is a normal Spring Framework project. So 80 SBMS people. So morning we developed, yesterday morning we developed this application. So here what programmer is doing, guys? I am starting the IOC container as a programmer. But when I go for the Spring Boot, do I need to start the IOC or Spring Boot will start the IOC?
Spring Boot will start.
Do I need to start the IOC or Spring Boot will start the IOC? Spring Boot will start the IOC. Spring Boot will start the IOC. Now, when I am running this boot application, Tomcat server is coming or Tomcat server is not coming now. Now observe the console. So when I run this boot application, when I run this application, can you see object is created by IOC. 72 classes loaded by IOC. But can you see here any Tomcat server is available or the Tomcat server is not available here?
Not
Guys, Tomcat server is available here or Tomcat server is not available here?
Not available.
not available.
Tomcat server is not available here. Tomcat server is not available here. Why? Because in the pom.xml, only boot starter, normal starter is available. So if you change this boot starter to boot starter web, if you change the normal starter to web starter, then Tomcat server will come. You can see this. Earlier only normal starter. Now I change it that to web starter. Now see the behavior. Now see the behavior. If you change the starter to starter web, now can you see what it is saying now?
Tomcat started on port 8080.
Tomcat server started on the port number 80. So auto configuration is working or not working?
Yeah, it's working.
Auto configuration working. How this auto now here when I run this application, Tomcat server is coming. Okay, so now I want to access my web application. Now security is coming, security password is coming, security password is not coming now.
Not coming.
Security password is coming or not coming? Security password is not coming.
Not
Why
coming.
the security password is not coming here?
Because
Because
we have not
security
added.
starter is not available. Security starter is not available. So if you want to security for your project, what we can do? Just you add Spring Boot starter security dependency. Spring Boot starter security dependency, if you add, that is fine. Now go and run your application. After adding this security starter, you go and run your application. So click on this boot application and execute. Now, can you see the security password is coming?
Yes, sir.
So here you need to catch one point. If you make any changes to the pom.xml, so here you need to catch one point. If I add web starter, Tomcat server is coming. If I add security starter, login page is coming. So can I say based on the dependencies, boot is working internally? Can I say based on these Maven dependencies, Spring Boot is taking the decision?
Yes.
Suppose
Yes.
if I don't add the web starter, Tomcat will come or Tomcat will not come?
Will not come.
Will not come. If I don't add the security starter, login page will come or login page will not come?
Not come.
Not come.
Will not come. So here Spring Boot is having auto configuration. That auto configuration is working based on the dependencies we are adding. The auto configuration is working based on the dependencies we are adding. So these dependencies are called as starters in the Spring Boot. Spring Boot is having auto configuration. That auto configuration is working based on starter dependencies. If you add starter web dependency, Tomcat server will come. If you add starter security dependency, login page will come. If you add starter data JPA, connection pool will come. Okay, so based on the starter dependencies, auto configuration is working in the Spring Boot. Okay, now tell me, what is the Spring Boot? Come on, guys.
Application
I hope
development.
you got some
Spring Boot.
clarity. What is Spring Boot?
It's a
It
rapid
is an
application
extension of Spring framework, and Spring Boot is used for the rapid application development, and it also provides the auto configuration feature, which is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot.
Right. So Spring Boot came into market in the year of 2015. This Spring Boot is an extension for the Spring framework. By using Spring Boot, we can develop standalone applications, web applications, and microservices. So when the Spring is already available, why the Spring Boot came? In the Spring framework, configurations we need to do manually, whereas in the Spring Boot, configurations are automated. So we are having auto configuration support in the Spring Boot. Okay, so if we use the Spring Boot, within fraction of minutes, we can develop the application and we can run the application. Within a minute, we can develop and run web applications by using Spring Boot. So what are the main benefits available with the Spring Boot? What are the advantages we have with the Spring Boot? So the first advantage, form starters, nothing but dependencies. Instead of writing so many dependencies in the pom.xml, if you add just one starter web, it will provide all the dependencies to develop a web application, pom starters. Okay, so here second advantage available with the Spring Boot, that is called as auto configuration. Second advantage that we have with the Spring Boot, that is called auto configuration. Whatever is required for the project, Boot is going to identify, it will provide that configuration. Okay, and the next we are having another advantage with the Spring Boot, that is called embedded container. We are having embedded containers support also in the Spring Boot. So that means you no need to set up the server to run the web application. Boot only will provide the server for you to run the application. And we are having actuators also in the Spring Boot. We are having actuators also in the Spring Boot. They are used for monitoring. So what is the meaning of a POM starters, guys? What is the main purpose of POM starters in the Spring Boot? They are going to simplify dependency configurations in the pom.xml. So instead of writing so many dependencies, if you add just web starter, it will provide everything to develop your web application, including server also. Okay, so if you add security starter, they are providing login page, they are providing authentication also for our application. So like this, the biggest advantage in the Spring Boot, that is POM starter dependencies. So we are going to simplify the dependencies configuration by using pom.xml. What kind of dependencies available? We can see starter web is available, which is used to develop the web application. We are using starter security to provide the login page for the application for authentication purpose. Similarly, we are having data JPA, starter data JPA. If you want to develop application with database communication, starter data JPA available. So when you add web starter, Tomcat server coming. When you add security starter, login page is coming. When you add JPA starter, connection pool will come. Similarly, if you want to send the emails through Java application using Spring Boot, starter mail dependency available. If you want to monitor the application, Spring Boot starter actuator is also available. One of the advantage of the Spring Boot, which is actuator, that is used to monitor and manage our Spring Boot application. Web starter is available, security starter available, JPA starter available, mail starter available, actuator starter available. So these POM starters are going to simplify our Maven configuration in the pom.xml. And based on these POM starters only, auto configuration is working. So what is auto configuration? Come on, guys. Based on I have shown you practically Am I talking theoretically or I'm talking practically, guys?
Practice.
Practically. So based on the POM starter, auto configuration working in the boot application. So if I add web starter, Tomcat coming. If I remove the web starter, Tomcat not coming. If I add security starter, login page coming. If I remove security starter, login page not coming. So POM starters are going to simplify dependencies configuration in the POM.xml. Then POM starters are used to enable auto configuration in the boot application. Then what is the meaning of this auto configuration? What is the meaning of auto configuration? Based on the POM starters, boot will identify what configuration required for the project. Based on the POM starters, boot will identify configurations required for the project and boot will manage those configurations in the runtime. Based on the POM starters, boot is going to identify what configuration required for the project and boot will manage those configurations. So this configuration is a manual process in the Spring framework. In the Spring Boot, that configuration is automated. That's why it is called auto configuration support in the Spring Boot. So that's why it is called auto configuration support. So if you add normal starter, only Spring Boot starter, if you add, it will start IOC container. So in the Spring framework, programmer should start the IOC container. Whereas in the Spring Boot, the framework will start the IOC container and will create the objects for the beans. You no need to do that manually. And if you add data JPA starter, by default, it will create the set of connections also. Connection pool to communicate with the database. You no need to write the get connection method. You no need to load the driver. You no need to get the connection. If you create the project with the JPA starter, it will go and connect the database. It will create the connection pool also. And if you add web starter in the project, then it will start the Tomcat server also. If you add the web starter, then it will start the Tomcat server also for our project. And if you add the security starter in the project now, then it is providing default loggage page for the authentication. If you add the security starter, then it is providing default login page for the authentication. So that is called auto configuration. So based on the POM starters, boot will identify configurations required for the project and boot will manage those configurations in the runtime. This is one of the biggest advantage of the Spring Boot. Why many companies are using Spring Boot? Because of this auto configuration, because of rapid application development. Within a fraction of minutes, we can set up the application and we can execute that and we can access that. The speed is there in the development. So very quickly, we can develop the application and they are providing common logics for the application development. You focus only on the business logic development. Spring Boot, one of the most powerful Java-based framework nowadays in the industry. This Spring Boot came into market in the year of 2015. This Spring Boot is an extension for the existing Spring framework. By using Spring Boot, we can develop standalone applications. We can develop web applications. We can develop microservices also. We can develop web applications and we can develop microservices also. Are you guys getting my point? So if we develop a project using Spring framework, if we develop a project by using Spring framework, we need to do we need to manage a few configurations on our own. Okay, so to avoid manual configurations in the Spring, to avoid manual configurations in Spring projects, Spring Boot came into market in the year of 2015. So Spring available from 2004 onwards. But Spring framework developed by Rod Johnson. By using that, if you develop the application, you need to do some configurations manually. So to do that auto configuration, if we develop a project using Spring, we need to manage few configurations on our own like below. So to avoid manual configurations in the Spring projects, Spring Boot came into market in the year of 2015. So Boot is an extension for the Spring framework. Using Boot, we can develop several types of applications, standalone applications, web applications, microservices. So if we develop the project using Boot, then we will get auto configuration. Using Spring Boot, we can achieve rapid application development. Within a minute, we can develop and run the application using Spring Boot. Very quick, very quick. Right. What are the benefits of using Spring Boot? Can anyone tell me? Guys, can anyone tell me what are the benefits of using Spring Boot?
Sir, one is form starter, sir.
One is form starter.
Another
Second
one
one?
is auto configuration.
Another one is auto configuration. Third one?
Next, embedded server you will get, sir, and
Embedded server,
actuators.
Actuators. So form starter. What do you mean by form starter?
Sir, it will simplify build configuration.
Yes, so it is going to simplify the build configurations in the form.xml. So
Yes.
can you tell me some example form starters?
Web starter, data JPS starter, security
Correct.
starter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mail starter, actuator, like this. There are so many form starters available in the Spring Boot. So based on the starters we configure in the form.xml, auto configuration working in the Spring Boot. So
Yes.
can anyone tell me what is auto configuration in the Spring Boot?
Sir, it will identify required configurations for our application.
Yes, so auto configuration is going to identify the configurations required for the project. So if you add boot starter, if you add a normal boot starter, then it is going to start the IOC container for us. If you add the JPA starter, it will create the connection pool for our application. A web starter, it will start the Tomcat server by default. Security starter, default login page for the authentication. And along with this, in the Spring Boot, we have embedded containers also. Do I need to set up the server to run the web application, or Boot will take care of that, guys?
Boot will take care of that, sir.
Yeah. So when you add the web starter, Boot will take care of the server that is required to run our application. Spring Boot will take care of the servers to run the web applications. We no need to download and install the servers here. Spring Boot will take care of servers required to run our web applications. We no need to download and install the servers, guys. So here, Spring Boot will support 3 embedded containers. Spring Boot will support 3 embedded containers. So what are those 3? One is called Tomcat. That is the default. When you add the web starter, by default, you are getting one server called Tomcat server. That is default. And the second one is available. That is Jetty. And the third one is available. That is Netty. Okay. So Boot is going to support for 3 types of embedded containers. One is called Tomcat. Second one is called Jetty. Third one is called Netty. So when you Netty, that is used for when you go for web flux dependency. When you add a web starter, Tomcat will come. When you add web flux dependency, Netty server will come. When you are implementing event-based programming, reactive programming in your project, then you can go for that Netty server by using web flux starter. By using web flux starter, we can do that. Netty. Netty is required when you are going for the reactive programming with a web flux starter.
The reactive programming means?
Event-driven programming, event-based programming. Listeners will be available. When one event is triggered, a listener will listen to that and it will take a action on that. Event-driven programming, listener-based programming.
Okay.
React.js is different, reactive programming is different. Got my point, all of you?
Yes, sir.
Next one. So next one, there is another advantage in the Spring Boot that is called Actuators. There is another advantage available with the Spring Boot that is called Actuators. So Actuators are going to provide production ready features for us. What the Actuators will do? Actuators are going to give you production ready features. What is the meaning of production ready features? Actuators are used to monitor and manage our application, guys. What we can do by using actuators? By using actuators, we can monitor and we can manage our applications. Sir, what we can monitor by using actuator? We can check the health of the application. By using actuator, we can check the health of the application. By using this, we can check beans loaded. Okay, what all the classes loaded by our application, and check the URL patterns. Check URL patterns available in the application, and we can check metrics available for our application, and we can check the environment properties of the application. We can download heap details of the application. Heap details of the application. Heap dump we can download, and thread details also we can download. Heap dump is available and thread dump also available. So all these things we can manage and monitor by using Actuator. So my application is running in the server. How my application is running? Okay, how many classes loaded by my application? What is the health of my application? What are the URL patterns available in our application? What are the metrics of the application? What properties loaded by our application? How many objects created in my application? What is the heap memory of my JVM? How many threads running? How many threads waiting? How many threads sleeping? The thread details also we can download. So these actuators are used for accessing to actuators to access production ready features. Nothing but monitoring and management became very simple with the help of actuators introduced in the Spring Boot. With the help of actuators introduced in the Spring Boot, the project monitoring, the project management became very, very simple. Actuators, they are used to access production ready features. Actuators are used to monitor and manage our applications. So we can check the health of the application. We can check the bins loaded by the application. We can check the URL patterns of the application. We can check the metrics of the application. We can check the environment properties of our application. We can do heap dump of the application. We can do thread dump of the application also. Are you guys clear with my point now?
Yes, sir.
Good. So can you tell me what are the advantages available with the Spring Boot?
Form starter, auto
Form
configuration,
starters, auto configuration,
embedded
embedded
container,
containers, actuators.
actuators.
So these all features are not there with the Spring framework. These are not there with the Spring. So Spring is successful in the market. People are using Spring earlier to develop the projects. But those people realized Spring is successful, but we want to make it more better for the developers. So that's where in 2015, the same company released Spring Boot into market, which is an extension for the Spring. Spring Boot as an extension for the Spring. So our application using Spring framework. Our application using Spring framework, our applications were using Spring earlier. Now our applications are using Spring Boot. So internally, the Spring Boot is using. So our application earlier used Spring framework. Now our application is using Spring Boot. So when you use Spring Boot, what is the benefit we are getting? Auto configuration is the benefit we are getting. And this is Spring Boot internally using Spring framework only. Internally, this Spring Boot is using Spring framework only to develop the applications. So I hope you got the clarity. 3 points I covered as of now. 3 points I covered as of now. Spring versus Spring Boot. Can you tell me the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? Come on, guys. Spring versus Spring Boot. 100 people are there. Nobody is responding. Spring versus Spring Boot.
Auto configuration is available in Spring Boot.
Okay, so when you go for Spring framework, powerful features are there in the Spring, but the problem with the Spring, some manual configurations.
Yes.
Some things, some configurations we need to do manually. Those configurations are automated in the Spring Boot. So if anybody asks, what is the Spring Boot? What is the definition?
It is one approach to develop Spring-based applications with less configurations.
Yes, Spring Boot is an extension for the Spring framework. It is one approach to develop the Spring applications with the less configuration. You can develop a project with a normal Spring. You can develop a project with the Spring Boot. So if you develop with the Spring, configurations you need to manage. When you go for Spring Boot, auto configuration support will be available. So can I say Spring Boot is a replacement for the Spring framework?
No.
No, sir.
No, sir.
It is an
And
extension.
extension for the
Extension for the
Spring
Spring.
framework.
extension for the Spring framework. What type of projects we can develop by using Spring Boot?
Standalone applications,
Standard
web
web
We can
applications,
develop the standalone
Distributed.
applications.
and
We can
yeah,
develop the web
distributed
applications, and we can develop the microservices also by using Spring Boot. So by using Spring Boot, we can achieve rapid application development. What do you mean by rapid application development?
Within a minute, we can develop and run web applications.
Yes,
quickly
very quickly we can develop and run our applications with the help of Spring Boot. So within a minute we can develop and run web applications using Spring Boot. Very quickly we can achieve this. So advantages already we discussed. Form starters available. Dependencies configuration is simplified in the Spring Boot, and with those form starters only auto configuration is working. So based on the form starters, Boot will identify what configuration required for the project, and Boot will provide that configuration. And Spring Boot is giving the embedded containers also. So servers will be provided by the Spring Boot. You no need to set up the server manually. Boot will give you server to run the application. And actuators also available. Actuators will give you production ready features of the application. So production ready features nothing but by using them we can monitor and manage our application. We can check the health of the application, what are the beans loaded by the application, what are the URL patterns available, what are the metrics, environment properties, heap dump, thread dump, like this we can check. Next one, sir, how to create a boot application, guys? How to create a Spring Boot project? So to create a Spring Boot project, we have two approaches, guys. Approach 1 and approach 2. To create the boot applications, there are two approaches available. Approach 1 and approach 2. What is the first approach? By using start.spring.io website. There is a official website available which is used to create the boot application. Start.spring.io. So that is called initializer website. Go to here and open this. Start.spring.io. So this is official Spring initializer website which is used to create the boot application. So you can select the build tool, Maven or Gradle. Maven, Java, Kotlin, Groovy. Which programming language you want to use in this boot application? Boot supports 3 programming languages, Java, Kotlin, Groovy, because this Kotlin and Groovy also JVM based programming languages. Boot version, current stable 3.4, 3.5.7 is the stable. In future, Spring Boot 4 will come into picture. Currently, still it is in the snapshot. Snapshot means under development, not fully ready. They are testing. Okay, 3.5.7. Group ID, artifact ID. How do you want to package your project as a jar or var? How do you want to use the configuration, properties file or YML? Nowadays, YML files are trending in the market. Which version of Java? We are using Boot 3.5 now. Minimum Java 17 is required. Minimum version of Java 17 is required. And what are the dependencies you want? Add the dependencies. Lombok dependency, DevTool dependency, web dependency, Spring web dependency, and JPA dependency, Spring data JPA, and security dependency. If you use, you can select like this. Okay, so like this you can select the dependencies that you want and you can click on generate. So this is one option to create the boot application by using this website. So which is start.spring.io. Create the boot application using initializer website. Okay, what is the approach 1? Create the boot application using initializer website. It will download the project in the zip format. Click on generate. So when I generate, the project is downloaded in the zip. Extract that zip file and import that project into your IDE. This is one option. So what is the first option to create the boot application, guys? What is the first option to create the boot application?
By using
from
start
the website.
initializer.
By using one website. What is that website? Can I call it as a initializer website?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
this
sir.
is a Spring initializer website which is used to create the project. And the second one, by using Spring Tool Suite IDE also, we can create the boot application directly. By using STS IDE also, we can create the boot application. So Spring Tool Suite IDE, official IDE provided by the people in order to create the boot application. So go to STS, Spring Tool Suite, File, New, Spring Starter Project. So when you use the Spring Starter Project, contacting web service URL. So internally, this is also using start.spring.io website. Internally, it is using start.spring.io website. So this is the reason when you are developing a boot application, internet connection is mandatory, guys. When you are developing the boot application, internet connection is mandatory for the system. Why internet connection is mandatory for the system? Why internet connection is mandatory?
To download the required jars.
Configurations.
It is redirect the same URL.
Internally, it is communicating with that start.spring.io website. Internally, it is communicating with the start.spring.io website. As it is communicating with that website internally, internet connection is required to create the boot application. From here also, you can create dependencies, you can select, you can click on next and finish. So that means finally, the project is getting created from the initializer website only. But if you directly go to the website, project will be downloaded as a zip file. You need to download, extract, import into IDE. Sir, I don't want to do that process manually. Can I directly create the boot project? Yes. So if you use Spring Tool Suite IDE, that is possible. Sir, can I use Eclipse IDE to create the project? In the Eclipse, directly we cannot create the boot project. Download from the initializer website and import into Eclipse IDE. If you are using Eclipse IDE, in Eclipse, we cannot create the Spring Boot project directly. And sir, what about IntelliJ? So IntelliJ, if you go for community edition, free version of IntelliJ, you cannot create the boot project directly. You need to follow the first process. Download the project from the initializer website and import into Eclipse or IntelliJ. Only in the STS direct option available to create the project. But this STS also internally communicating with the initializer website. That's why internet connection is required for that. Suppose if you have licensed version of the IntelliJ Enterprise Edition, if you have, then we can create Spring Boot project directly. If you have enterprise version of the IntelliJ, then you can create the Spring Boot project directly in that. See here how to create the boot project. How to create the Spring Boot project. So create the boot application by using Spring Initializer website, then download it and extract it and import that project into Eclipse IDE. Import project into Eclipse or STS or IntelliJ. So start.spring.io is the URL. Suppose if you want to use IDE directly, if you use STS, file, new, starter project option available directly. Then in Eclipse, directly we can create. Import that project into Eclipse. IntelliJ Community Edition, directly we cannot create. IntelliJ Enterprise Edition, directly you can create. So in this way, you can create the boot applications, guys. Spring Boot. Now tell me.
You can also use VS Code for this.
You can import into the VS Code also, but it's not recommended. VS Code mainly used for front-end applications, not for the back-end applications. Don't use VS Code for the Spring Boot. Use Eclipse, IntelliJ or STS. Only you can choose from these three, not VS Code. I think yesterday in my Spring Boot class also one person used STS ID, sorry, this one, VS Code IDE, but it's not recommended. Use Eclipse or STS or IntelliJ. Any one you can use from these three. Okay, good. Thank you guys. With this, I hope you got some clarity on what is the Spring Boot, what are the benefits of Spring Boot, and how to create the boot application and how to run the boot application. So in the Monday session, you can join the Monday class with the same Zoom link. In the Monday session, I will explain internals of the Spring Boot. Sir, what is this run method here? What is this run method in the Spring Boot? So if you see, there is a run method and here there is a annotation. Okay, so how it is working internally, the internals of the Spring Boot, I will discuss in the Monday session, same time, 9:30 a.m. with the same Zoom link, you can join. Thank you.